So you want to build a gaming PC that's going to be great for 1440p and 4K gaming. A build that's going to smash through all of the latest AAA titles, boast decent upgrade paths, and in this challenging climate still offer you good value for money. Well, you've come to the right place, because in today's video I'm going to be trying to do just that by assembling a system with some of the best PC components on the market that can get you gaming right now while navigating some of the craziness that we're currently experiencing. As always, I'll be walking you guys through all the parts that I've selected for this build and why, taking you along for the build process from the start right through to the end, and even looking at those gaming performance numbers a little bit later so you can see exactly how the hardware in this build really performs. Let's do this. Usually I'd start my builds off by walking through parts like the CPU or GPU, but today we are not going to do that. We're going to look at the case first, because I'm actually very excited to take a closer look at this Antec's brand new Constellation C6 Curve. As many of you will know, alongside making PC build videos here on YouTube, I own a company where we sell pre-built gaming PCs called GeekaPC, and one of our best-selling systems was built inside of Antec's C5. This is not necessarily the successor because it's a slightly different form factor, it's the model up and features their new curve design. Guess you could call it design philosophy? Anyway, now the point is, what it's got curved tempered glass that goes across the side, curves around the front, and then even curves around to the back. That gives you a unique view where you can see directly through the case, which is great. They've also adjusted the power supply orientation so it installs kind of sideways, which I guess I can show you by pulling off some of the panels. And what you'll see is that Antec have actually created the option for us to mount the power supply here. So that should make that PSU installation a little bit easier. What it's also going to do is free up a little bit more room where the power supply kind of divider is to give us a bit of extra airflow, and that's where these two reverse blade intake fans come into play. Now these are important in this case because we've got no intake on the front or the side, so I am interested to see what effect this has on temperatures later, because I'm sure there will be, well, an effect. Now gladly you do keep a good degree of air availability at the top of the case. Up here we've got room for a 360mm radiator, which with 3 fans should provide us a nice bit of negative pressure going out of the case. Otherwise, we've got support for reverse connect motherboards, we've got nice rubber grommets, which is great. The back of the case gives us some good options for cable management, and as I say, this wraparound glass piece that looks really quite special. The lower panel at the back also clicks off pretty easily. It just slides up like the one at the front, and you can see here where all of our front panel cables go, and even some room for things like 2.5-inch drives should you wish to install them. The I/O sits at the front of the case alongside this additional air intake area with 2 USB Type A's, a Type C, and of course our HD audio port alongside the power button, which is this little notch located just here that looks really rather sleek. So that's the case, but what are the parts I'm going to put inside it? And I'm going to start by walking you guys through the GPU choice in this build, because it's an area where, against the backdrop of high memory and high storage prices, I actually think there's some really great value on offer. Now this right here is the RX 9070 XT, specifically the Gigabyte AORUS Elite model, but honestly any 9070 XT is going to work just fine. I actually saw these go as cheap as around £500 here in the UK on Prime Day, and I know in the US I've seen stories of them actually dipping below the original MSRP, which is insane. Now for that you're getting a lot of performance. This frankly stomps all over the RTX 5070 Ti, especially with recent driver optimizations and updates. It really is true, by the way, that AMD GPUs get better with time, and even compared to the likes of the RTX 5080, you will see some surprising results where this can really get close to that card, which is impressive considering the price point. I've actually built a GPU comparison tool over on my website, GeekaWhat.com. You can go over there, you can compare this against basically any other GPU in pretty much any game at any settings and see the exact performance differences for yourself. Go and take a look, it's all our own benchmark data and really, in theory, should be super reliable. Let me know what you think. As I say, this card from AORUS is a rather nice looking design, a little on the larger side, but to be honest with you, given the room in the case and this sort of panoramic front view at the front, I think it's a chassis that will really look good with a bigger GPU. And if I hover it into the case, you can see what I mean. You really want something that's going to be a statement piece inside of the C6 Curve. I'll be pairing up the RX 9070 XT with this, the AMD Ryzen 5 9600X. Now you might be thinking, James, isn't the 9600X going to introduce a CPU bottleneck? And the answer really depends on the resolution that you're planning to game at. You see, the thing is, the Ryzen 5 9600X is the perfect CPU companion for a GPU like this at those higher resolutions, 1440p and 4K. You see, the higher the res, the more likely you are to run into a GPU rather than a CPU-bound bottleneck. If 1080p is your jam and you want to use this build for like super competitive Fortnite at 500 frames per second, it might be worth stepping up to something like a Ryzen 7 7800X 3D instead. But for 1440p and 4K gaming, this is going to be a great combo. This CPU is super affordable, 6 cores, 12 threads and good clock speeds, and the idea is that by spending 100, 150 less on the CPU, that gives us a bit more money to help offset some of the price rises to things like memory. Talking of memory, 32 gigabytes of G.Skill's Trident Z5 Neo ARGB is going to be perfect in this build. Honestly, speeds and latencies is not something you want to worry about too much. Yes, go for a kit with the best speed and latency you can find in your given budget, but don't obsess about 7000 CL28 because you're going to pay a lot of money for it. And as explored in my recent video where I tested loads of GPUs, loads of CPUs, all with different memory configs, in most cases, unless the price difference is minimal, you're not going to see value from those higher speed spec kits. That's not to say that those higher spec kits are a waste of time. They're obviously the best option if you can buy them, but don't set your bar too high there. In terms of storage, I've gone for a similar sort of value proposition. This right here is the Teamgroup T-Force G50. Now this is a PCI Gen 4 NVMe drive. It's not as high end as some of the designs you'll find on the market. Read and write speeds on this are only rated at about 5 gigabytes a second, but honestly, that's plenty quick enough. And for gaming is going to be, wow, absolutely fine. In terms of the motherboard choice in today's gaming PC build, I've gone for one of my favorite boards on the market, the Eagle Wi-Fi 6E from Gigabyte. Now I keep coming back to this board time and time again for a few simple reasons. The first reason is that given the features and stuff that you get from this board, it's cheap. Like, really cheap. Here in the UK, I think like £140. In the US, I've seen it at not that much higher in US dollars, which is crazy. And for that, you get really a lot of motherboard. We've got the AM5 socket we need for our Ryzen 9000 CPUs and beyond. AMD, I think, have now said they're going to support this socket with new releases until, I think it was like 2029. We've got PCI Gen 5 support for at least one of the NVMEs, DDR5 memory support, and even the rear I/O has got a good amount of connectivity. Yes, there's some oddities like this little retro PS2 port for low latency gaming, and the Ethernet is only gigabit rather than 2.5 or 5 gig. However, for a gaming PC build, this is going to be perfect. And it's another area where I'm trying to save about 50, 70 pounds or dollars, which again can help make that memory a little bit more affordable. A couple of things I need to talk about still. The power supply is next. Antec kindly sent over this alongside the case. It's their NeoEco 850. Now this is a platinum power supply, which is probably a bit overkill. 850 watts is where you roughly want to be for the 70X XT. You can get away with 750 watts, no problem, especially given the CPU in this build is a little on the lower side. If you're going for a higher end chip, you want to use this for, I don't know, a bit of video editing with a Ryzen 9, that's where an 850 might come into play. Either way though, I was quite excited to see how this actually performs, see what it looks like in the build, check out the cables, so I figured we will include it. Finally, the other thing to talk about is the CPU cooler, and I have gone for an old faithful once again. It's the Montech Hyperflow 360. Now, this is a fantastic 360mm all-in-one. The price on this cooler is consistently amazing. You're going to get great cooling performance. Once again, we've got a tool on the website where you can compare all the coolers that we've tested, and for the price, this consistently ranks very, very highly in our charts. Yeah, fans are good, quiet, RGB, what's not to love, and the thing is pretty easy to install too. Talking of easy to install, I'm going to kick things off by installing the CPU into the socket, followed by the memory to the right-hand side, and our storage just down below. Now, with that done, the next step is just to move the motherboard into the case. Now, in terms of these standoffs on the motherboard, these are the little holes through the board itself, and we normally need to check that they match up with the standoffs inside the case itself. But in this system, it's an ATX board and an ATX case, so we know that we're going to be good. If we're installing a micro ATX motherboard in here, we definitely need to make some changes, but as we're not, things are resoundingly simple. The main thing really is just getting the whole motherboard nicely aligned, and then using the included accessory box, which I believe is this white box on the floor just here, to go ahead and get all of those screws secured into place. Okay, so the board is in, and the next step, we've got a few options. We could crack on with the CPU cooler. Only problem is installing this into the top is going to leave us quite limited room for things like the CPU power cables. We also could crack on with the GPU. That's going to get in the way less, but still going to be in the way in the middle here. Or we could carry on with the power supply, the cables, and all the wiring. So I think, to be honest with you, as much as it's a bit more of a boring option, that's what I'm going to do next. Now, I'm going to walk you guys through the kind of cables that that we need to install in this system. And it would be helpful if my overhead camera angle wasn't quite so zoomed in. There we go. You may be able to see the cables now. Now inside the power supply box, you'll find your power supply power cable. This one is European, so that isn't going to fit in my plug socket. So it's gone. But you'll also find a little bag of included cables. Now, we're seeing big improvements recently to the way that power supply cables are. And it looks like, yeah, these are kind of a similar vein. And if I open them up, I can show you guys what I mean. You can see that the actual sleeving on these is sort of individually nylon rubber sleeved. The only thing I would like to see really is an integrated cable comb on this motherboard power cable on this large chunk here. Now, in terms of the power cables we'll need, it does come with an integrated PCI Gen 5 power cable, but that's not going to be the one for us, as we've got 6+2 pin PCI power cables in this build instead. You can see this one here is labeled PCIe, and we need 3 of the 8-pin blocks. So we need this one? Nope. This one. Yes, you can see here, this one, it is a pigtail, which some people don't like. It's not going to cause a problem really. That's going to give us 3 connectors, so we need those. We're also going to install the largest, which is the 24-pin motherboard power cable. We're going to install 2 CPU power cables. These ones here are labeled CPU, as you can see on the sides of the connectors, a little something like so. And then a SATA power harness as well, which is this one just here. I'm then going to take the actual power supply itself out of the box. You can see here, this thing is pretty compact, which is going to be great. And I'm going to plug in all of the power cables into the rear of the power supply. That's then followed by sliding the power supply into the case. I'm going for a fan down orientation, which will pull in air from underneath the chassis. Now then, with that all sorted, the next thing to put in is the CPU cooler. Now, I talked earlier about Montech's Hyperflow and why I think it's a great choice for this build, but how do you actually go about installing it? Now, the first thing, and this is the first bit of good news with this cooler, is that all of the fans come pre-installed. So you can see here, the fans are already on and we haven't got to worry about them. The 2 cables we need are the ARGB and fan headers, which go to the motherboard, and that is it. Now, what that means is that we can basically go ahead and screw the radiator directly in to the top of the case. With the way that the fans have been installed, these are in exhaust by default, and if I can just thread this cable through now to make life a little bit easier for us later on, what you'll see is that with the tubes at the front, all the wires and stuff for the cooler are actually hidden, which gives it a really clean installation. That is really rather nice. Now, this can be secured with 12 screws at the top. These all come included with the CPU cooler and are going to hold the radiator into place. I'm going to have to put it down momentarily while I get those screws, and then obviously I'll screw it into place. Once the radiator's in, the top panel cover can go back on. That's going to start making the case look a little nicer. And then what I need to do is locate the AMD mounting bracket, which I think, yes, is in the CPU cooler box, which is going to slide over the bottom of our water block, a little something like so. Now, what you'll see is there are 2 screws missing, so I'm going to put these thumb screws and the cradles on, and then go ahead and secure the cooler down to the CPU. Remembering to add, of course, a little bit of thermal paste too. Now, that is all in, and the final part really is the GPU. I am undecided about the fans. I may swap out the rear fan and the bottom fans for some RGB units, but let's get the graphics card in first, and I can make that decision a little bit later. Now, I'm going to hover the GPU over, and it's the very, very top slot on this particular board. Now, what that means is that in the case today, of our, I think it's 7 PCI lanes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yep, 7 lanes, we want to take out the first and second. It's the only, arguably the only disadvantage of this Gigabyte board. I think that that lane is a little bit high up, and I think that putting it 1 slot down, I guess maybe the top slot maximizes compatibility, but I think in an ATX case, I think it can just make the top of the build feel a tiny bit cramped. But that is a very, very minor criticism overall, and I'm sure there are advantages to this approach. Once that's done and dusted, I can then slide the graphics card into place, apply a bit of pressure, that'll click it in. What you can do is you can pull it out from the rear. If it doesn't come out, you know that you're good to go, and then I can add in our standoff back into place, a little something like this. So there's our first standoff, followed of course by the second. Once that's done, I'm then going to thread the GPU power cables through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the dedicated ones for the main connectors on the outside, and then our sort of like pigtail connector in the middle, just because I think it might look a little bit cleaner, and then pull those power cables through. I know some of you are going to be saying, James, I don't like the pigtail. I think it looks a little bit ugly, but that's the only option with this power supply. It's not going to cause any problems. There's none of the risks that are associated with what we've seen on certain Gen 5 power cables, so we're going to be fine. The only other thing though I think I am going to change is those fans. So I'm going to swap out the rear fan for an ARGB exhaust, and then those 120mm intake for some reverse blade ARGB intake fans, and then power this thing up to see just how good it looks. What an amazing looking gaming PC build, but the big question is always about performance. How well does this system actually stack up in the latest titles? Well, let's start off, shall we, with one of the most demanding games out right now, 007 First Light. At 1440p high settings on the 9070 XT, we see an average frame rate of over 96 frames per second. Getting the system so close to that triple-digit FPS, that 100 frame marker, at full rasterization is mightily impressive, and graphically at 1440p, the game looked fantastic. In Arc Raiders at the same 1440p high resolution, we see solid results too, around 160 frames per second on average, that delivers a competitive gaming experience at 1440p. Moving through to Battlefield 6 next at 1440p high settings, and here we see an average frame rate of 126 frames per second. Not bad. While the new Forza Horizon 6 delivers the strongest frame rate of all the games we tested today. 4K high in this particular title on the 9070 XT yielded just shy of 180 frames per second. Marvel's Rivals at 4K high brought us back down to reality a little bit and showed us an example of where actually a low resolution might be a better shout. 4K high here delivered 87 frames per second. Honestly speaking, you probably want to drop down to 1440p to get the extra frame rate. This is a game where frame rate is more important than resolution. Finally, we also test Cyberpunk because it's just a good one to have in the list. Here at 4K high, we saw an average frame rate of over 80 FPS. Though it is worth noting that 1 and 0.1% lows were on the lower side of 46 and 16 FPS respectively. This is a game where Nvidia GPUs still, in my opinion, have a bit of an upper hand. Overall though, this is a build that delivers exceptional value for money given the kind of hardware inside, and as seen in the gaming benchmarks, strong gaming performance headroom at both 1440p and 4K. What do you guys think of this build? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.